Hello and welcome back to Whence, a Freemasonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. I'm your host, Robert Johnson, a York and Scottish Rite Mason as well as a Knight Templar. This last week, I was installed as Junior Warden of my home lodge. I'm looking forward to a great year. This is the time of year when many lodges are doing their installation of officers. If you are an officer or not, hit the show up on Facebook and tell us about it. Some of you had noticed that I released the full article with photos about my visit to the Scottish Rite of Chicago on the blog. If you haven't read it or seen all the pictures, stop by the blog and check it out. Also last Friday, a short piece I did for the Midnight Freemasons went up called A Chance Encounter. I hope you all got a chance to check that out as well. The first thing that I wanted to read is a little bit that I saw on one of the Masonic groups on LinkedIn, which is a social network of a business sense. It was entitled 10 Guides for Freemasons. 10 Guides for Freemasons. Number 1. I am the representative of my lodge and of all free and accepted Masons. Whatever I do or say reflects directly upon myself and my fellow Freemasons everywhere and our good works. Number 2. I am responsible for what my lodge and Freemasonry represent. They can be no more than what my fellow Freemasons and I make them. Number 3. I should not criticize what my fellow Freemasons do for Freemasonry unless I have a better suggestion and I am prepared to do it myself. Number 4. I must remember that the fact that I bear the name Master Mason or Freemason is not enough. I must continue to be worthy. Number 5. My fellow members and I are our lodges in Freemasonry. Without our active support, they cease to exist. Number 6. My lodge does me a favor by calling upon me. I am not doing the lodge a favor by serving. It is both an obligation and a privilege to help the lodge and Freemasonry. Number 7. I should treat my fellow Freemasons with the same respect, honor, and understanding that I would like to receive from them. Number 8. It is not a right to be a Freemason. It is an honor. I should respect that honor by abiding by all the precepts of my lodge, my Grand Lodge, and Freemasonry as a whole. Number 9. Whatever differences my fellow Freemasons and I may have, we are all bound together by the bounds of our loyalty to the Grand Architect, our families, the Lodge, and Freemasonry. Number 10. The willing Master Mason and his understanding family are the lifeblood of the Lodge and Freemasonry. Now, the preceding was posted by a brother on LinkedIn, but I don't know if he was the writer or not. The next piece I have, I think you all will enjoy. It's a study of The Winding Staircase by Homer L. Zerwalt from the 1989 Transactions of the Illinois Lodge of Research and from the May 1990 issue of Southern California Research Lodge. In the ritual of the modern-day Masonic degrees, the building of King Solomon's Temple plays an important role. It has also fascinated the biblical scholar and the archaeologist in their attempts to prove the existence of the temple and the Bible story of King Solomon. All through history, this subject has produced an air of mystery which seems to defy a positive solution. The Masonic scholar willing to spend the time and effort can spend hours of research on almost any one of the many features of King Solomon's Temple and still end on a note of mystery, admitting that the subject is incomplete and more research is needed. An example to illustrate this point is the reference in the second degree which refers to the winding staircase, which we are led to believe existed in King Solomon's Temple. Although there is but one reference to the winding staircase in Masonic ritual, it has been made the central feature of the second degree, which every fellowcraft Mason must symbolically ascend in order to make his advancement in the degree. As all Masons will recall, the reference is made to advance through a porch by a flight of winding stairs to the middle chamber, there to receive his wages. The details very clearly give a winding staircase leading from the porchway entrance up through the temple sanctuary to the upper floors. This reference contains a number of specific and positive statements which we are apparently asked to accept as facts. They are: 1. That there was a winding staircase in King Solomon's Temple. 2. That it was approached through an entrance from the porchway. And 3. That the workmen on the building ascended these stairs to receive their wages in the middle chamber. The serious researcher will find that the writers of the charges and ritual of the craft were apparently more interested in the dramatic effect on the candidate than they were on historical accuracy. Biblical scholars and archaeologists differ widely as to the interpretation placed both on historical and archaeological evidence dealing with King Solomon's temple, and in particular with the passages dealing with the staircase. But it's fairly safe to say that neither the biblical scholar nor the archaeologist would support the specific statements made in the Masonic ritual of the second degree. As of today, the only historical evidence relative to the building of King Solomon's temple is found in 3 different books of the Old Testament and in the writings of Josephus. Of these writings, it is generally accepted that the version in the first book of Kings is both the oldest and most reliable description we have of the temple. Our interest here is in the mention of the winding staircase. The passages relevant to the winding staircase are found in chapter 6 of the Authorized Version, which is probably the one used by the ritualists who composed the lecture on the second degree. 1 Kings, chapter 6, verse 1. And it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month Zip, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. Verse 5. And again, the wall of the house he built chambers round about against the walls of the house round about, both of the temple and of the oracle, and he made chambers round about. Verse 7. And the house, when it was in building, was built of stone, made ready before it was brought thither, so that there was neither the hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron heard in the house while it was being built. Verse 8. The door for the middle chamber was in the right side of the house, and they went up with winding stairs into the middle chamber, and out of the middle into the third. The description above clearly states that there were winding stairs, but an examination of the text finds inconsistencies in the passages themselves, and serious discrepancies are noted between our Masonic ritual and the scriptures above. An example in verse 8, which places the entrance door for the middle chamber in the right side of the building. It continues by stating that the stairway went from the door to the middle chamber and on up to the third chamber. No mention is made to an entrance on the ground floor. The second Bible reference is in Chronicles, Book 2, Chapter 3, verses 1 through 9. The description which parallels the King's Version omits all references to the chambers except the verse 9, which states, "And he overlaid the upper chambers with gold." It is widely accepted that this upper chambers in Chronicles are the side chambers mentioned in Kings. Notice that there is no mention of a winding staircase. The third description is found in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel came from a priestly family, and some researchers think could have lived at a time which would have enabled him to have seen Solomon's temple firsthand. However, at a time of his writing, the temple had been destroyed by the Babylonians. The parallel passages of the above quoted from Kings and Chronicles are to be found in the 41st chapter of Ezekiel, but differs from the other two. Ezekiel chapter 41 verse 6. And the side chambers were 3, one over another, and 30 in order. And they entered into the wall which was of the house, for the side chambers around about, that they might have hold, but they had not hold in the wall of the house. Verse 7, 1. And there was an enlarging and a winding about still upward to the said chambers, for the winding about of the house went still upward round about the house. Therefore the breadth of the house was still upward, and so increased from the lowest chamber to the highest by the midst. It would appear that what Ezekiel was trying to say is that chambers themselves wound about the house in long galleries. By wound about, does he mean encircle? He makes no reference to a staircase. There are other differences noted in the 3 versions of the Old Testament. Our Masonic view was probably taken from the translation of the Authorized Version of the Old Testament, which contained many mistranslations in the relevant passages. The translators themselves were aware of the difficulties, for attached to their manuscripts are numerous marginal notes and questions. Biblical Hebrew text often presents difficulties in translation, and some cases impossible to a point of where one can only surmise at the true meaning. Professor Robert H. Pfeiffer of Harvard University and Boston University, in an introduction to the Old Testament, writes, "The third element in Solomon's magnificence consisted of his buildings primarily on Zion in Jerusalem, but elsewhere. The account in chapter 6 verses 1 through 9 is one of the most difficult sections in the Old Testament, first owing to scribes who failed to understand architectural terms, and the obscure descriptions of the original author. Neither an architect nor a clear writer. The text has been greatly corrupted. Secondly, the account has endured successive additions and revisions. The first difficulty comes from the Hebrew text of verse 8, in which a word is defective. The word appears as lullim, and then translated to English as winding stairs. Scholars point out that if the word is really lullim, it appears nowhere else in the Old Testament, but an associated word, lullin, appears in several passages of the Jewish code known as the Mishnah, and later called the Talmud. One reference reads, "There were lullin in the upper chamber opening into the Holy of Holies, by which the workmen were let down in baskets so that they should not feed their eyes on the Holy of Holies." Most translators translate this word to mean opening, while others translate the word as trapdoors. The Jewish Encyclopedia, Volume 12, pp. 85-92, says that the word lullin refers to trapdoors, but gives no supporting evidence to the meaning. The second difficulty from the Hebrew text comes from the original word tekona, translated as middle. In our phrase from Kings, verse 8, the door for the middle chamber was on the right side of the house. The meaning of the word tekona is uncertain, but most modern translators refer to it as the lowest instead of the middle. This seems to make more sense. Dr. James Moffat, in his translation of the Bible in 1924, entitled "A New Translation of the Bible," translated verse 8 in Kings this way: "The entrance into the lower side rooms was on the south side of the temple. You climbed to the middle row, and from the middle to the top row, through trapdoors." In 1965, another translation came out in English edition of the Jewish Bible with verse 8. "The entrance to the lower story was at the right-hand corner of the temple, and access to the middle story above was by trapdoors, and so from the middle story to the third." There is no reference to winding stairs. If the temple had winding stairs, as a few scholars still think, it was probably in the side walls and served the side chambers built into the thickness of the walls from the first and second levels. These side chambers were used while the temple was being built for the purpose of paying workmen their wages. Later, they were used as a storehouse for treasury rooms of the temple, into which the treasures and gifts to the temple were placed. As mentioned at the beginning of this paper, the other source information about King Solomon's temple is in the writings of Josephus, a Jewish historian. He mentioned Solomon's temple in several of his works, but the main references are in his history of the Jewish people called the Antiquities of the Jews. One relevant passage quoted from Riston's translation, book number 8, chapter 3, "The king also had a fine contrivance for an ascent to the upper room over the temple, and that was by steps in the thickness of its wall, for it had no large door on the east end as the lower house had, but the entrance were by the sides, through very small doors." Apart from Josephus and the Bible, we have no other literary source to turn to for information. Unfortunately, there is no evidence in Jerusalem to which we might gain a knowledge of the subject, for successive conquerors made a thorough job of the destruction of the temple, and not one part remains standing, and nothing has been uncovered by archaeologists. Regardless of whether there was a winding staircase, a trapdoor, or just an opening to a different compartment of the temple, the mystery still remains, and will continue to fascinate both the biblical scholar and the archaeologist, and be of particular interest to the Freemason. References cited: Book of the Old Testament, Standard Work, Grand Lodge of Illinois, The Mystery of the Winding Staircase by A.L. Shane, and a new translation of the Bible by Dr. James Moffat. And now I have to mention our Android and Apple app that lets you listen to the shows streaming and have access to the show's bonus features. Links to both of those are on our website, wcypodcast.com. I also need to tell you about another way to listen, Stitcher Smart Radio, which is free and does the same thing, which lets you listen streaming but without the added benefit of bonus features. Just make sure you type in the promo code Whence with no spaces when you register. This week's famous Freemason is Tom Mix. Thomas Edwin, or Tom Mix, born Thomas Hezekiah Mix on January 6, 1880, passed on October 12, 1940, was an American film actor and the star of many early Western movies. Between 1909 and 1935, Mix appeared in 291 films, all but 9 of which were silent movies. He was Hollywood's first Western megastar, and is noted as having helped define the genre for all cowboy actors who followed. The American actor was from Utopia Lodge number 537 in Los Angeles, California. That's it for this week. Remember to find us on Facebook and follow on Twitter at Whence. Check us out on Tumblr and Pinterest, Google+, as well at the email address wcypodcast@gmail.com, which is also where you can email the show for any questions if you like. You can always find everything on our website, wcypodcast.com. Until next week, stay on the level. For Whence, I'm Robert Johnson.